All right, we are live on YouTube. And Vince, I don't know if you can see, but Chief White is on as an attendee, so just let me know if I need to.
Okay, yep. Just during the conversation, he,
If he raises his hand, I'll let you know.
yeah, or if I asked him to
Yep.
join in, yeah.
Okay.
Andrew, I don't know if you can hear me, but I might send you an email after this work session and see if there's just I can chat with you to catch up on a couple of things.
Of course.
Weekend. So
be happy to.
All right. Yep.
Does this afternoon work for you whenever this finishes?
Yeah, that would be fine. Yeah.
Okay. All right. We'll talk to you then. Thank you, sir.
Yep.
I have 9 o'clock, so I'm ready whenever you are, Your Honor.
Thank you. I think we still have one council person here. No, here we are, right on time. Okay, it is 9 o'clock, and all of council is present. So at this time, we'll call the City Council work session meeting to order. Clerk, please call the roll, and also mindful of our reporting our location.
Thank you. Councilperson Vining,
Here, Monroe, Michigan.
Germaini,
Here, City of Monroe.
Lamore,
Present, City of Monroe.
Felder,
Here in the city of Monroe.
Whitman,
Here, City of Monroe.
Ikoangeli,
Present, City of Monroe.
Mayor Clark.
Present in the City of Monroe.
Okay, and the clerk treasurer Lavoy is I'm here in the City of Monroe.
Very good. I know that I see Chief McCormick just joined us, as well as the city manager. Mr. Green is here, and we have some in as attendees as well. But we'll guess we'll move forward. Mr. Pastu, we're you got one item on the agenda for discussion with the introductions or start, and then we'll do conversation.
Thank you, Your Honor. We've had, going back to last fall, when there was a petition submitted for a number of recreational marijuana facilities. It did not meet the sufficient number of signatures to be considered a ordinance referendum. But at the time that council asked us to look into, consideration for an ordinance with this and what it would look like. We kind of broke it up into two groups, one dealing with an administrative aspect of it that included myself, Mayor Clark, Mr. Green, Chief McCormick, Mark Cochran, and City Attorney Matt Buds. And then also reviewing the land use aspect. And I think Mr. Green, through the Citizens Planning Commission, had a couple of discussions related to that. But we also did some presentations to City Council regarding buffering considerations that we talked about on a couple of other work sessions in the past. And then I think probably about a month ago, the council asked, let's just have a work session, dedicated to this, which I think we all feel would be a good productive time to just focus on the issue as well. So we put together, Mr. Green and I worked on a staff report, much of it directed toward getting council to provide some direction to staff, but also contains some of our recommendations and a little bit of background information with that. And part of it is if there is an interest in some of the establishments within the recreational marijuana definitions, it would help in developing an ordinance. Mr. Green can draft one, and yet at the same time, there's been times in the past where it doesn't go any further than that. So we're trying to gauge what the appetite for council is. But also part of it's important just to have an understanding, I think, of the definitions of contained in the what I refer to as recreational marijuana, but the initiative adopted by the electorate here in Michigan in November of 2018. Understand the revenue sources associated with that, and then certainly look at the land use considerations driving toward a recommendation that Mr. Green and I will have related to toward those uses and locations. So if I may just before with that introduction, kind of move forward into it from there, Your Honor, if there's any
Sounds
questions. Good. Okay.
I'll see if council has any thoughts from just kind of the structure. We have our information received to us to review. So I don't see any hands. I think we can move forward.
Okay. So in the staff report, I mean, we do play a role in any of the licensing. Great deal of investigation, background checks associated with the state licensing and regulatory affairs, LARA, but also there's a state marijuana regulatory agency as well that's engaged with that. But we do play a role in the sense of approving the local land use with it. And it's certainly a condition by which any applicant applying to the state has to receive before a license would be issued. And so that's our role in the process, other than once it's established or even part of a site plan or a special land use approval, that we do have some regulatory enforcement, and I'll talk briefly about that as we go through this as well. But let me just start by going through that. There's included in here was definitions, and this was just essentially cut and paste from the citizen, the initiative ballot was approved in November of 2018. I think in many ways, many of them are pretty straightforward, whether it's a marijuana grower. The micro business has got a little more detail to it in the sense that it limits cultivation of plants to 150 or less, but also involves processing and packaging of marijuana, and to sell or transfer other marijuana to individuals, essentially retail sales, or to other marijuana, or to a marijuana safety compliance facility or other establishments. So there's a little more involved with that, but it involves essentially three elements, in this case, grow, processing, and retail. Marijuana processor, I think, is straightforward with processing and packaging of marijuana. We did have some discussion about what the sell means, so I authorized, I shouldn't say authorized, I put this comment in, if authorized, we could sell, define the term sell should be defined in ordinance as more of a wholesale activity as opposed to a retail. So if there's any clarification, if we went down that path of approving that use, then we think that would be good. marijuana safety compliance license to test marijuana certification for potency and presence of contaminants. And then a marijuana retailer, which is, I think, fairly straightforward with understanding, again, the limitation that they can't sell to anyone under the age of 21. Interestingly enough, when you look at the marijuana regulatory agency website, they use adult use marijuana. And so it I think, tries to comply with that definition there. So going through quickly, just an overview of the revenues related to marijuana. There's essentially two of them that would pertain to our consideration. One is that the $5,000 application and annual inspection fee that's written into the citizen-initiated law, but also an excise tax, which is levied on the sale at retail or micro businesses. And so there's nothing in there related to any of the other four uses with that. So as I go through and cover the application renewal, the $5,000 application is as part of the application locally. I will be honest with you, it's not a lot considering if you're to do a thorough site plan and our special use review with that not only involves, planning, but also your wastewater operations, given the nature of the operation, certainly a security and certainly having the fire department, depending on the use, whether it's a grow processor, going to involve some review of the materials that they're going to be handling, some of which are considered hazardous. So the one thing with it, I know some communities are, as I put in there, excited about the $5,000 application fee and the annual renewal. As I said, I have don't share that the 5,000 is all that great related to the initial review process, but also I have some general concerns related to the ongoing annual review. And in particular, as it pertains to the city of Lansing versus Bolt case, which is establishing the difference between a fee and a tax. And the significance of it here is, and I put in there what the Michigan Supreme Court established were the three criteria: that it has to be, one, a regulatory purpose, and clearly in this case it would be. Two, a user fee must be proportionate to the necessary cost of the service. And I will come back and talk with that. And then the last is that it's voluntary, of which I think you meet that standard. The concern was the $5,000 is, once it's establishments in place, depending on its complexity, you more than likely will not hit that $5,000 threshold. And at some point in time, that Bolt challenge may come about and arise. The other part of it is that it's not a windfall for the general fund, which is where I think a lot of it, but you still have to handle some disbursement and allocation of that to the wastewater operations in the building department, and those are self-supporting enterprise operations. And so, part of it is just understanding that this is, what would be covered under that, whether it's one, sufficient, two, it's still even going to be dispersed within the operations themselves. The other part of the revenue is the excise tax, in which Michigan, under the initiative, levies a 10% excise tax. It's, again, subject to the sales at retail and micro business operations. Part of that disbursement of the excise tax covers this, first and foremost, the state's going to cover from their ongoing operating expenses associated with the licensing, enforcement, inspections related to the marijuana licenses that are approved under this statute. But there's also a commitment for a couple of years to provide $20 million for research related to veterans and marijuana, whether it's a way of impacting positively the rate of suicide that goes along with that. And so the other part of it is what's remaining is going to get dispersed to 4 different entities, one being 35% of the remaining balance goes to the state education fund, 35% goes to the state highway fund, MDOT, 15 to county, and 15 to the local municipality in which that retail or micro business is operating. Very, very grateful that this occurred during on Wednesday when the State Department of Treasury released what those disbursements were going to be for fiscal year 2000. The state's fiscal year ended September 30th of 2000, so it reflects the 1-year period preceding September 30th of that. And so consequently, I treated that as an attachment, but it was interesting in that the amount came to $28,000 per retail establishment for city and county entities, and so that in that disbursement gives you a sense of it. I have a couple of things in there I think that I put in the staff report that it's worth noting. One is, I think in some ways that that may be the top end of it. There is probably an upper threshold of state sales, and so as additional communities add retail and micro business businesses, will that number stay at 28,000, and do you expect it to drop? Interesting, talking with a colleague yesterday that someone from the Michigan Municipal League said, that's probably going to happen, and that we may have that 28,000 may be the top end of what that disbursement would look like. The other thing that was very telling with the disbursement, and I didn't know the answer at the time, that's why I was going to treat it as an unknown in this report, was is it a function of, if you will, per facility, or is it a function of sales? And so I put the note in there that it doesn't matter if you approve a retail, as I would have referred to it as a freeway interchange marijuana superstore, or if you do a small boutique at 1,000 square feet, it's not going to affect what comes back to you one way or the other. The pot goes into the state and then gets dispersed based on the number of units. So certainly something for consideration if council is going to consider, retail or micro businesses, the scale of it from that. I'm rambling on here, so if there's questions before we go any further, I'll just take a breath, have a drink water here.
Thanks, Vince. I'll see if there's any. Andrew, looks like you raise your hand. Go ahead if you have a question from Mr. Bested.
The $5,000 application and annual inspection fees, was that put in place to be a maximum, a cap on what these would pay to the municipalities? I mean, I'm not so familiar with the Lansing case. Would that just be a $5,000 additional because it's a marijuana business in addition to all the other inspections that they would have to do? I mean, certainly they don't mean to provide a hard cap on what municipalities can charge for all the additional inspections that need to be done.
I'm looking at the citizen initiative that set that $5,000. Trying to remember, for some reason, Section 8 rings a bell with it. But
looks like Mr. Buds may have it right in front of himself. As you look, I'll see Mr. Buds. Real quick first, Matt, Clerk Lavoie, so we have some others that may have comments. We'll need their location and where they're at as they speak. Would that be correct?
Yes.
Okay, go ahead, Matt.
No, that's great. Sorry. Yep. I was going to say public comment at some point in the meeting. The section is section 6, subsection 4, that a municipality may charge an annual fee of not more than $5,000 to defray application, administrative, and enforcement costs associated with the operation of the marijuana establishment in the municipality. So I guess I'll say my read on that is, for the items related to them being a marijuana facility, those would be where you'd be capped out at saying, all right, this is a marijuana facility, here's what needs to be done. If they have to, I would say if they get their, I'll say, periodic fire inspection for which there's a normal other additional charge that any other business would get, then I would say that would not be included in that 5,000. This 5,000 is mainly for the administrative. Are you doing everything you were supposed to do as a marijuana business? Is my read on that.
Okay. If I can follow up with the city manager.
Yeah, sure. Please do, Andrew.
Are we to take from what you're saying that that $5,000 is not going to cover the additional costs of just regulating the marijuana business for all the complexities that go along with that above and beyond what would be a normal business?
Well, I would just think, let's break them down into the different anticipated process. And I think, part of it would be certainly with the water department, backflow prevention or cross-connection inspections, which we do for commercial businesses. Then you would have additionally, depending on the operation, you engaged in what will likely be, industrial pre-treatment process and how that is handled. And then obviously with the fire department, any kind of SARA Title III or any hazardous material handling inspections, as well as whatever conditions may have been contained in there through the building department. I've viewed it as the 5,000 covers all of that. Obviously, Mr. Bud's, but at the end of it, the most you're going to get out of it's $5,000 per facility under the best of circumstances, even if you're able to levy a fee for these other uses. So I'm not seeing it as a major windfall to the general fund for that, as has been kind of referenced.
I just to follow because Andrew mentioned you mentioned, I should say, Vince, about the Bolt case, and that's a case from years past of using whether something is a tax or a fee. So it's not necessarily related directly to the marijuana establishments and business, but it's something that in your review, you're just looking at something that could be raised as a discussion for lessening that amount, only because is it a tax, is it a user fee? Is that correct?
Yes.
So I know as we reference that, it didn't come about because of this. It's not a policy.
Oh, no.
It dates. I just want to make that clarification too. So it's come up in other discussions and other user or tax or user fees in other established businesses as well, or uses. So that was it. All right. I'll see if there's other questions from council at this point on some of the council or Michelle Germaini.
Thank you, Your Honor. In regard to the inspections, who does that? Is it our building department or is it a state inspection? Do they provide that?
Well, I think there will be some state inspections as well, but no, we've got local administrative and enforcement responsibilities. Clearly, it's going to be our water system, our wastewater system, in conjunction with the municipal authority that we have with Frenchtown and Monroe Township. Certainly the fire department, and from a security standpoint, I suspect you'll have the police department engaged in review of those procedures that are established as a condition for approval, as well as the building department, providing just kind of probably a walkthrough and review of the conditions of the operation.
Okay.
Other
Thank
questions? Thanks, Michelle. Other questions for Vince at this point? Okay. Vince, your next thoughts, or just moving along, or something you want
to? Yeah, there's just one other thing related to that I just wanted to clarify. And I think I used the example of Colorado levying a 30% excise tax. Actually, what they levy is a 15% excise tax, but it needs to be noted that they have another 15% sales tax. Their general sales tax in Colorado is at the state level is 2.9%. So it's a functional, 27.1% additional tax upon whatever may also be levied by the state. And in our case, our excise tax in Michigan is 16, our excise tax is 16, the tax overall is 16%, broken down by 10% excise tax that goes specifically to this fund for this operation. And then the other 6% sales tax goes into the general distribution as with others. So just want to make sure I clarify that, for comparison purposes. So this kind of gets, I think, just as a background is, looking at the definitions, the revenue stream. And then Jeff and I kind of looked at the land use considerations, and our sense of it is when you look at, the infrastructure demand, and we put together a table and probably more footnotes in there than need to be, and maybe a little hard to follow. But, whether it's water, sewer, electric, natural gas, or communications, and communications is not insignificant related to the security needs that would be associated with this. And then some of the other general land use considerations that go with other type of commercial or industrial operations. In this case, we have odor, noise, lighting, buffering, which we've talked about. General security, but security fencing, because it's going to probably require a higher level of perimeter and site security than what you would have for most operations. Traffic, parking, circulation, hazardous material handling. And then if you look at the type of building operation or facilities that would go along with essentially the grow, the micro business, processor, secured transport, maybe lesser to a safety compliance. Our sense of it is that these are really functionally industrial type uses, particularly the grow, the micro business, processor, because there is some an extraction. The secure transporter does have, obviously, from a logistics standpoint, an industrial component to it, with garage, warehouse, and just office area with it. And safety compliance, it could be a lab in a commercial area, but I suspect that part of their operation is going to involve some extraction, which certainly involves some, different chemicals, materials, heating materials, accelerants that, certainly the fire department's going to have to be aware of as part of that operation. And so where it goes to is that, we kind of viewed this as, from a land use perspective, is that the best location, and even when we went through the buffering, I think we kind of decided that the eastern edge of the city more than likely is the best location. If you're going to mitigate the odor that may go with the operation, it's best to consider the prevailing westerly and northerly winds for that, so it doesn't create any kind of nuisance effect on residential or commercial areas. And clearly you've got a concentration of other type of industrial operations that's certainly compatible with land use planning as well. And then if you take into the security end of it, that may have more fencing, it's probably better that it's not as visible from a residential or commercial corridor as well. So with that, we just felt that, if you're going to consider it, it's going to be mostly up in the Mignano Industrial Park, and certainly the Port Industrial District, which is much more heavy industrial type of use. So before I go on with that, is there any thoughts, questions,
Sure.
challenges to our assumptions?
So I guess I'll take, Kelly's got a question, but before just some kind of review, I know that we received kind of like how we're progressing through the conversation. And, the definitions we covered, the revenues and disbursements. I forgot, I did have a question about that. And now we just kind of went over the land use considerations, items that we've had some discussion on in our previous work sessions when we talked about distances and those bubble discussions of, through the city where something may be able to fall. And then the land use considerations, Mr. Pastu has gone through the type of establishments absent retail, because I think that's a different conversation also. I think Vince wants to have that conversation separate from the others once we get through that. That'll come as well. I did have one question, then Kelly, I'll get to yours because I'm kind of stepping back a second. On the revenue side and the disbursement that came out from the state on the recreational marijuana payments, it's based on the marijuana revenues collected for fiscal year 2020. This is specifically, it appears to be about the municipalities and counties or townships. And I know I was trying to find some additional information as you were, Vince, yesterday and others. Do we know if the disbursement, I've not been able to confirm yet, I've heard some comments that the disbursement to the state, that 20 million was dispersed this year or not? I'm still trying to confirm that.
I don't have an answer to that, Your Honor. The one thing we just got, what's the disbursement to municipalities and counties, which was in itself helpful. But I didn't get, okay, here's the revenues that were collected with this excise tax within this, fiscal year period at the state level. How much of it was used for, state regulatory and administration associated with the state level, and whether that $20 million was included in the disbursement to come to essentially what's the amount available to the cities or local governments, townships, counties, and then state education tax and MDOT. So that I didn't see how that breakdown took place and the overall, if you will, disbursement of what was collected with the excise tax.
Thank you. I think why I find it important is I appreciate this report because it does give the breakdowns of when we talk about our municipalities, townships, and counties. But knowing that that is also part of that, then we'd understand that the total amount of revenue, absent if they took a pass, I'll say, I'm not sure they can, but if it says it shall be paid. But I think it's important to know then we'd have a true understanding of what the overall revenues were that through the last fiscal year. So that was my back question, and I'll move forward, Kelly, because you had your hand up for comments then as we moved into land use considerations and maybe other questions you have. Good morning.
Good morning. I was just curious when Vince spoke about the odors. I've never been to any of these facilities, but I had assumed that they have some type of ventilation or that. Is odor normally a problem in these facilities?
I've heard of it being a problem, but there is the ability for them to handle some of that extraction of the odor and handle pull that out, if you will, through a ventilation extraction process. But if it's a flat out grow, you can smell it. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. But I think, I think a combination, if there is an odor with it, and it goes along also with the buffering and many of the other aspects of an operation, it just makes sense, to have it in the Mignano or Port Industrial District for other reasons, even if odor was, and that'd be a condition by which, you may have approval is how do you handle the odor related issue.
I was just curious because that's the most complaint or concern that I've heard people have about the odor.
Well, a couple of issues that we've had in the past, one with hemp and one with one that we're looking into, that it's pretty pungent. It can be, unless you have a system in place to, handle the removal or mitigation of it.
It's a good question, Kelly. And I think it also, what do we put if
Mr. Mayor.
I'm sorry, Mr. Green, go ahead.
No, I was just to address that question. I think one of the reasons that Mr. Pastu and I brought up the odors issue is that we hear that anecdotally, but also we want to have that in there so that we can address that issue. A large facility may require a very complex type of odor mitigation system. And again, when we're reviewing this, that may be something that's beyond specifically the staff that we currently have. Again, just from our own experience recently here in the city, we've had a couple of situations where the building department has ran up on smaller operations that are occurring right now without any kind of approval or licensing. And the smell is rather, as Mr. Pastu said, rather pungent, and it's very detectable outside of these buildings.
Yeah, so I guess that's kind of the comment, Kelly, I think is you're correct. And I think is what is, if establishment of whatever is placed within an ordinance, where would it be? And to what extent would you want the type of filtration system to be kind of mandatory required? I know that many of the businesses are putting in some, so I'll just say some real healthy ventilations, and maybe others may not be, I'm not sure. But it's those that may not put anything in, and how that's part of that regulation part comes in the front and the inspections, and to make sure that things are put in place if council proceeds with them. Mr. Green is correct that we have some that are popping up, and it's usually a neighbor or somebody that's because they're venting it just out without any ventilation. Anyway, I think everybody recognizes that's not going to be sufficient. But how do we put that into a place to make sure, whether it's yourself, myself, or anybody's doesn't have that, I gotta say, that complaint or concern. So it is a good question. Other questions for Mr. Pastu or Mr. Green at this time? Brian.
Thank you. Who's in charge of the accounting as far as in terms of how much marijuana is at the facility or grown? How are sales kept track of to determine the taxes paid? Who monitors this and how often? Is it the state, the city, the entity itself? Just some questions I need to know answers to as far as whether or not it's going to put more of a burden on our system, the city system, just to keep track of all these things. How much more money are we going to put into this? And also, we also have some attendees that are raising their hands as well. Not sure if you want to answer any questions with them yet, but
right. So, right. Thanks, Brian. I meant to mention that in my last opportunity to speak. Yeah, we have attendees, and this is a public meeting, but it's the council's work session, and I'd like to get through our conversation. There will be an opportunity for those in attendance if they have a comment about something. I know it's kind of waiting to the end, but otherwise we'll get into discussion dialogue outside the council, and this is, as our work session is to vet through these and have a conversation and move forward from a city position. But there'll be opportunities at the as we get through all our discussion, if there may be some points to be made or something we might have missed. So thank you, Brian, because I wanted the attendees to know that as well, because I do see a hand raised. Thanks.
If I may answer the question that Councilman Loire brought up, the state is going to be primarily responsible for that. And that, I've looked at some of the regulations that they have primarily with the medical marijuana, but they've got some pretty, stringent accounting and operational controls, I think, in there. And certainly if there's any kind of theft, fraud, there's certainly an obligation on the part of the operator to report that immediately to the state. And so, but they do handle the details. Is there a way to slide through it? Yeah, probably. If you, but at the same time, they do have a pretty, what I thought was a pretty detailed system for tracking, the plants and the processing and what have you. So I don't see that, to be honest with you, and get to your point, I don't see that being, that aspect of it being an additional burden on the city.
Other questions for Mr. Pastu from council? Andrew?
Two questions. One regarding revenue. You're saying that the reimbursements from the state, that 15% that goes to localities, that's based on the amount of licensures issued?
Correct. For retail and micro businesses.
Goes into a common pool and then gets distributed to everyone equally based on the amount of licenses they have. Are those only retail and micro business licenses? Because I think those are the only ones would be subject to the excise tax.
That is correct.
Okay, so just as we move forward in a, if we're considering the revenue stream at all, that it's going to be only those two license types that are going to be affected by that. Not allowing marijuana businesses to operate aren't necessarily going to affect. I mean, you're saying that the $5,000 additional inspection fee is pretty much, it's going to cancel out for what the expenses are going to be. So that's, net zero increase. The only way that there's money to be gained at all, if that's the city's interest, and it may not be, is going to be through the issuance of those two licensure types. I just want to clarify.
Well, the 5,000 applies to the other facilities, just so
right,
you understand.
but you're saying that the city we're not going to make money off of that.
Not a lot.
It's
If we
going to
do.
cover our costs, and that's about it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
From the community, it's saying, well, we can make all this money, and it's like, well, let's take a step back and look at it at that and be realistic about what kind and how much. And so a bit of nuance injected into the conversation. And then the second question, I know odor's been brought up. I think the city on record has, I don't know if it's your guys' interest to put an additional ordinance on the books specifically pertaining to marijuana businesses that are operating, but I'm of the opinion that there already is, and I brought this up at a previous meeting, a fairly comprehensive odor ordinance on the books right now, and I'm looking at 720-155. That essentially says if you're causing a problem for other people, you have to stop. You either have to mitigate it or you have to stop operations. Plain and simple. So I see it sort of as incumbent upon the business. This is their problem to take care of. And if they can, great. Feel free to operate wherever you can mitigate. And if not, well, that sort of solves the issue for you there, doesn't it? And that probably would be part of the additional inspections, I would imagine. So that's sort of a non-issue for me. That's something that we've already taken care of on our end.
But if I may just follow up on that, if we do allow for the, some of the operations that would need that, we certainly would make that, and this is where it's important to have this discussion as to how you would develop an ordinance to make sure on the front end that there's specific detail related to that plan review, if you will, regarding, the odor extraction process that will be used. So above and beyond what's written right now, it would be what I would consider as part of a special land use condition for either a special land use or the overlay district, however it would be approved. So.
Other questions at this time for Vince? Brian?
Just to follow up with Andrew there too. So if there is an odor problem, correct me if I'm wrong, it's going to be brought forth by the citizens, possibly us, and we're the ones that are going to have to take control of that based on our ordinance. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, we would have that enforcement responsibility. And again, I think the important thing is if we go into authorizing these type of uses, that the front end conditions are phenomenally important to make sure that that detail is addressed, and we do have an understanding of the system that would be used and the maintenance associated with that. So, because you don't want to start reacting after the fact, we'd really prefer just to obviously address it right away.
Any other questions on up to where we are? Michelle, go ahead. Jermaine.
Just to clarify, Vince, the money, if we make any, does that go into the general fund or is that a different line item on our budget? Not budget, but.
Well, I think the only question we have is, if we're able to charge for the other inspections, fire and police functions would, if it's additional separate above the 5,000, would fall in the general fund, and certainly the water cross connection and wastewater and building would be in a separate fund.
Okay, thank you.
So we've the land use. I think we've had the other work sessions. We talked about that, and then also hear about what the establishments other than retail. So Kelly, you have a question, and then we'll continue if there's questions where we are up to this point.
Yeah, going back to what Andrew was saying. So the $5,000 is an initial fee that has to be paid. And that's for all of the upfront setup and whatnot. So beyond that, wouldn't there be a potential to gain revenue, because these services that we need to provide, they wouldn't be ongoing and continuously costing us over the $5,000 with, right? There is potential to gain revenue.
Yeah, let's just hypothetically say, you just get to pocket the $5,000. You still have an ongoing regulatory responsibility with, cross connection inspections for water operations. If it's an industrial pretreatment process, certainly the wastewater aspect of it has to be addressed. Again, fire with their ongoing hazardous materials inspections in handling some of that, will still be involved. And again, the ongoing security related aspects that the police department will provides, some review and oversight with it. So at a best case scenario, you could pocket $5,000 for each use, but question is whether that $5,000 annually is going to come out of these other inspections that are going to need to take place.
I guess I was thinking about the sales revenue if we were to go for micro business or retail services.
Yeah. Oh, that yeah.
Way above.
Yeah, that's where that 28,000 disbursement came in. Is it would be related to if you approved a retail had we had a retail or micro business operation, yeah, you would have gotten $28,000 or maybe a smaller amount based on a larger denominator that, but it would be in the, high 20s as a result of that. So, which kind of drives, if I may just continue on, Mayor, just to move it in that direction is, Mr. Green and I, we, obviously are recommending that not to consider any other use other than retail. And part of it is the location end of it. We've done the buffering analysis and ended up, look, if we're going to do this out in the east end of town, either in the Mignano Industrial Park or in the Port District. But then it brings into question, particularly, what's the highest and best use of these industrial related properties? In some ways, we're sitting, particularly, it will grow immensely, I think, in a few years when the Gordie Howe Bridge opens up. And, we're located on a really prime logistics corridor. And is it the highest and best use of what remaining land that we have for that to allow? Some of the operations will, if you just think in terms of making a business decision, what's going to be the yield, per square foot from a taxable real and personal property basis and job creation. You look at a grow operation, and that's probably not going to get you a whole lot of anything, from a facility standpoint. Processing, yeah, it might, but it also brings with it a lot more involvement with, fire operation as far as oversight. And so, our sense of it is that we just don't feel real strong that about, those uses other than the retail end of it for council to consider. So, before we go into the retail again, let's have a challenge it, and let's kind of walk our way through it if you'd like.
I just want to make a follow-up comment. I think it kind of ties to Kelly's question on that 5,000 and what it could be used for, and will we have things to have to attend to later once this is established and the initial inspections and setup are done. I think it's a good conversation. So think about it in kind of from a wastewater or waste side. There's always byproducts from any type of manufacturing. We have some in our community currently that is like a metals manufacturing. Well, there's certain type of chemicals, acids, and things used, and we can't just put them into the wastewater and send it down to the plant and think that they're going to know what it is. So there's a lot of attention there that has to be done. And when it doesn't meet the parameters, whether it be state or federal, then there's got to be and I'm not the expert, so there has to be certain treatment done up front, whether it's coming through or done before it departs from the business. So one of the items I've just read about here in the last week or so, some of that are establishments, whether it be grow operations or processors and that, they're gonna, I don't say bypass is the wrong word. They're not going to use the facility of a wastewater direct, but they're going to use retention or detention type ponds for their items. Doesn't mean it's just going to sit there and be done. It still has to be treated at some point, especially if it's going to then go to the wastewater plant in a different route. It still has to be treated and still has to be done with that. So those are some of those administrative, I think, items that are going to have to come up for inspection, review, and discussion that will be ongoing, as well as items that are just the initial setup. I don't have any examples of what's, and then maybe it's shipped to a hazardous type, not landfill, hazardous location to the collection of that is also something that still has to be managed. That's about the one that came this past week or so that I learned about. So I'll just throw that as another example. So Vince has kind of went through the other establishments and said kind of where the administration's report or comments are in relation to those. And then of course we're here to talk also about the last one was the retail. So I'll ask before we move on to that, is there any other comments or questions for administration from the council regarding to where we are so far on the other establishments? Again, I know we've done a lot of work in previous work sessions as well. Andrew.
In the recommendation to go towards to look at retail exclusively, does that include micro businesses as they include the part of the disbursements as well, or are you saying retail only?
Pretty much retail only. Micro businesses, because of the processing associated with it, is one that adds a little extra involvement. And clearly, if you were, I'm not opposed to it necessarily. It's the scale is smaller, but it does have the industrial component. And if it was to be considered, what's the scale of it out in an industrial area?
Well, I guess my point, and so sort of why I was leaning towards that direction, is because they seem to be inherently capped at the volumes.
Yes, at this time.
Yeah, that's was more where my mind was at.
Yep.
And not only that, but having sort of an inherently local business is more nice rather than just a franchise of something much larger.
Yeah, and one of the things this is some of the conversation that we had, Jeff and I, with the fire department. It's not like a microbrewery. This is a little more engaged as far as the processing end of it, and given the limitation, and again, not being an industry expert, can you actually make the business plan with 150 plants or less, with the probably significant investment associated with the processing? It could be scalable. But you also are seeing at the state level, there's a push now to increase the number of plants for that very reason, from 150, because it's, from a social equity standpoint, created not the microbreweries I think that they would have hoped to have seen in the Detroit. And it's telling me that's a function of economics. Just the cost with making that number work.
I'm very privileged to be in a position where I don't really have to worry about that. Whether or not the business is profitable isn't really an issue from where I'm sitting. That's sort of up to the individual investor on whether it's economical for them to do it or not. That's not really our concern.
So I think that the micro business, of course, is more than retail is, because it allows the opportunity to cultivate up to 150 plants, process and package. So you're getting back into the other items that the administration just reviewed, and some of the thoughts to that. Also allows us to sell or transfer, and we could so it's kind of all encompassing in some senses. But I guess if the legislators has the ability to through actions increase the number, And while we kind of buy into a micro business of 150 plants and think, well, that's manageable from a local side, when it changes, I think we're then going to be, state law changes, we're mandated to follow that. And so when I read that article last week, I understand the foundation for why it's being presented, but now it's kind of changed in what municipality or township may be signing up for, knowing that it could change to allow more than what we somebody may anticipate. So, but you're right. There's up to the business to either be profitable or not. But if we how we decide that from a land use and business standpoint, it does impact the community too. So, other questions for Vince before we get to retail or for administration? All right, Vince.
I want to ask, are you okay with where this set of recommendations are going?
John?
Exactly.
Thanks, Mayor. My understanding based on the staff recommendation is to forego the grower, micro business processor, secure transport and safety compliance, and strictly focus on retail.
That's what I
correct.
understand too. Yep.
Is council fine with that?
Yeah, that's kind of where he's seeing where we're at, and of course we're not making decisions today. We all know that, but that's also for those that are attending necessarily. This is a work session for dialogue, discussion, and kind of getting feels and consensus thoughts of where council kind of sits on these. And so it's a good question, John. It really kind of brings it all to review before we move forward. I appreciate that. Mr. Green had a comment, and then we'll see if there's other items regarding from John's a review there. Jeff?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As Mr. Pastu and I went through this and we're kind of discussing the staff analysis that we were putting together and that Mr. Pastu primarily put together. One of the things that we looked at that was really analogous to this was the development of the Lazy Boy site. If you all remember, what we originally had was the idea of a storage facility coming on to what is one of the prime properties within the city of Monroe at one of the highest traffic intersections probably in the county, and that would have created 3 jobs. Same type of thing is potentially here. You have industrial property that is certainly significant and valuable, where a facility like this might create jobs. But is it going to create the type of jobs that a similar industry occupying the same space would? Would a grow facility be comparable to a Vin Tower? And that's a question that we looked at and didn't seem to be able to come up and say that, yeah, it would. From what we've seen from reports, what we're reading about some of the facilities that are potentially coming in, they are providing jobs, and it looks as though the pay scales are relatively good. But again, would it compete with a trade position with a manufacturing facility or something along those lines? The other comment I had regarding the $5,000 application fee, I can only address that through the planning department, but a simple application review, which would include a site plan, which may include a special use application, which would include public notices to the newspaper, which we're required to do, would certainly hit at $1,000, if not up into the $2,000 range, maybe even a little bit higher. If we had a building department that had to go outside of our department to review, for example, an odor mitigating system, that may be requiring us to go outside to a facility or an expert that's, again, paying an additional fee. So the $5,000 fee sounds very good when we look at it, but it really is going to be, I think, eaten up really quickly once that review starts. So that's all I had, Mr. Mayor, before we went into the discussion of the retail.
Okay, thank you. So thanks, Jeff, because that gives like a review there as well. So John, your review there was really kind of what the administration is at this point. I'll say pre our discussion on retail. Any other thoughts from council as far as the information from administration regarding those use establishments. And I'm fine with that review and recommendation myself, but we'll see. Other thoughts from council? I know I see Michelle and then Andrew, so.
Go, Andrew was first. Go ahead, Andrew.
Okay, Andrew, I'm sorry, missed that.
Regarding one of the points that Mr. Green just made regarding inspection fees and the enforcement of our odor ordinance, because it's on the book separately and it pertains to all city businesses, not just marijuana businesses, would that be or could that be issued above and beyond whatever the $5,000 allotment is specifically for the marijuana businesses? This is an ordinance that's germane to every business that operates in the city. And there, I guess in my mind, there could be an inspection fee levied separately of, the $5,000 allotment that's put in by the state.
I think that would be part of the inspection, but I think Mr. Green was getting at part of the special land use approval is we'll probably have to bring a consultant in to review that specific set of shop drawings that they're going to propose for that special land use approval. So, but certainly as an ongoing basis, yeah, it would be part of, I would think, just is it working, functional? Is it being maintained? Those type of things.
And Mr. Mayor, if I might add on is, and I understand Councilman Felder's point is that they are required to meet that, and that would be part of the enforcement. The problem being is that when they submit something that says this is our system to eliminate odors, is if we've never seen that system before, we have to figure out and may have to go outside to say, does this actually work, or is this something that's concocted that looks good on paper but really isn't going to function correctly?
Or the scale of it. Is it going to handle the amount of plants and processing? So it's a complicated thing, and certainly would be part of the special land use approval.
I understand your point. You're looking at saying that it's all been established, built, it's functional, and then there's the regular call or report that may come in of an odor. Now it becomes into I'll say the current ordinance of how we respond to odors. The 5,000 is everything up front to make sure it's done and signed off on. So it's really moving. I understand your point. Mm-hmm. John, you have your hand up? I missed Michelle. I'm sorry.
Oh, Michelle, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Michelle.
Just to follow up with the industrial, and I think it's smart for us to wait because we have a gem of a port down there, and we will be attracting, I think, quality business with that respect, because we have the port right there. We have land that we can use, and I think financially will benefit for the city much more than industrial marijuana. That's all I want to say. We need to keep that in mind as well.
Thank you. From the logistics side, I understand. John.
Yeah, I think, I don't want to get so hung up on the odor issue, because odor is kind of like in the eye of the beholder. If I lived over, next to a hamburger stand, I don't know if I'd want to smell hamburger grease all day, and it really depends on the use. And maybe Matt can weigh in on this, but from a zoning point of view, regulating odors can be fairly difficult for a community, because you have to have a standard in which to apply that says that the odor is bad. So, I mean, it's just a byproduct, I guess, of what marijuana is, but I don't think we should dwell on the odor issue all that much, because I think it's a kind of you can get into a Pandora's box in terms of zoning on it and regulation. Matt,
good point, John.
Maybe you have some idea.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think we talk about even sound ordinance and what's tolerable, what's not in decibels, and we found those are almost impractical to try to measure and enforce. I see Brian has his hand up, but I'll give Matt first if there was a follow up, and then I'll go to Brian.
Your Honor, I'll just say, I think both points are correct. Odor ordinance is difficult, right? I mean, what may be offensive to one may not be offensive to the other. It may change on the day, the wind. I've seen in these cases, okay, have have the judge go out and smell that day, right? Is that offensive to a reasonable person kind of thing? Which day do you go out for that? So I mean, there's definitely difficulty there. And I'll say, in my opinion, even more difficulty than sound. Sound, at least you can try to make the argument about, okay, you can measure decibels, here it is, what's reasonable. I think it's even more difficult with odors. So I would concur with Councilman Angeli's point that it is difficult to enforce and have standards on that front.
I mean,
Thanks.
the standard would be, Your Honor, if the judge went out to smell it and turned out getting high, then we have a problem.
Brian?
Thank you. We do have history about smell in the city of Monroe, IKO factory. If anybody recalls that within recent history here, they are now closed. There was a shingle manufacturer here in town, right by the Chessie tracks on Elm Avenue, where Bay Corrugated currently exists. So I'm not certain what we have regarding that and ordinances passed. The history that we had with them, that might be something to look down and track down and see what exactly happened in that situation.
A good point. We have some exposure here locally. John?
Yeah, I can shed some light on that because that happened back in 2002, 3, 4, and 5. It wasn't the city of Monroe that got IKO to comply. It was the EPA out of Chicago because they were violating emission standards, and they had a standard on the books that they violated, and that's why they were penalized and eventually closed. But the city of Monroe is the one that did not close IKO because of the odors. It was the EPA, and at the time it was the Department of Environmental Quality.
But I also know it was also a big sticky point with the residents that were there as well. And I know that they brought that to somebody's attention, and possibly they're the ones that brought it to the EPA's attention. I'm not sure.
It did maneuver through the city as a start point, and that's where many local items do. There's a resident or an issue, and then then you find the location that's going to be able to regulate or manage or bring compliance. So it's a good example locally from not so far past. Other thoughts on before we get to the retail? We're about an hour in, and then we're going to have some good discussion on the next topic. Any final thoughts on the considerations on the establishments reviewed so far? Vince, any questions?
I see a couple of hands up though, Your Honor.
Okay, I'm sorry if I missed it. I'm looking for waves.
You got Andrew.
Oh, Paula, I'm sorry.
Yeah,
And
Andrew,
Paula,
Kelly, and Paula.
I'm sorry. I didn't see him on the blue hand, so I didn't see it visual. Paula, then Kelly. Paula.
Yes, I just wanted to say that, I'm thoroughly against all of this personally, but being a city and doing what is right, and I am very proud of the city looking at this. And I do agree that as long as we go along with retail, that this is probably the best for the city, best for the community, and satisfying to the other people that are involved. So I just wanted to make sure I had an input that I do agree with the retail. Thank you.
All right, I apologize. I had my side bar here on the attendees, not the panelists, so I missed those coming up. Kelly, I'm sorry.
Just want to be clear, if we're only looking at retail, are we still looking at putting retail in an industrial area, or am I getting ahead of where you're going here?
That's where we're going next.
And then
That's the next part of the conversation.
Okay, I'll wait.
Okay. And Andrew, I think you might have a final here.
Just regarding, whenever there's a complaint or whatever is an issue, or whether there's a violation of the ordinance in terms of what constitutes a violation of the ordinance, it's how we enforce everything. It's how you enforce noise ordinances. The police department gets a complaint. How do you know that the noise is too high? Well, did someone call and complain? Well, then I guess the noise is too high. It's how we enforce everything. It's how we enforce the weed ordinance in the grass cutting ordinance. Did someone complain? Well, then I guess the grass is too high. I certainly invite the police chief to chime in here to tell me I'm mistaken, but to my understanding, that's pretty much how we go about enforcement of most of our ordinances in terms of the violations thereof. And then otherwise, I was going to bring up the point that Councilman Lamore did, but I'm happy to have the background that Councilman Icoangeli provided. I thought that had to do more with the odor ordinance of the city, but I'm being told no, and I wasn't there at the time, so I'm of a mind to believe those who were. Thank
Thanks,
you.
Andrew. I think, many of our responses do start from a resident's call. Sometimes a call, sometimes it's a complaint. I think some of the examples in the ordinance are a little more measurable. I mean, we know the weed ordinance is and the grass ordinance is 8 inches. If it's 7 inches and somebody doesn't like it, we would go there and say it's not within the ordinance to prevent. Noise, yeah, decibels can be measured, but sometimes that's questionable when it's how long and duration as well. But smell, I'll just say I know people that find the odor and aroma of marijuana to be pleasurable, and they don't find it to be offensive. So that's where it's a little less measurable, because it's about likes and dislikes versus measuring that odor as it comes by or present, and then it becomes more personal position. So it is a little more difficult to measure, I think, but that's where the definitions come in, and that within our ordinance, and I'd have to go back and look at, as you brought up, our ordinance, how does that define that, and is it measurable in that fashion? I think your points will take it. Other comments from council? If not, Vince, we'll probably should move forward into retail.
Well, thank you, Your Honor. As stated in the staff report, there really isn't a recommendation or analysis that goes along with it. When Mr. Green and I were talking, I think he aptly asked the question, okay, if we get to this point, the question is why? What are we looking to accomplish? Is it economic development, financial purposes, community necessity, branding, or other legitimate purposes and considerations? And then we just listed some things that if you're inclined to establish retail operations, how many, where, and then we listed some special use considerations that go along with that. I won't go into them at this point. They're fairly straightforward. The only one that that we didn't put on there, and probably should have, is just as after it was sent, is consideration for on-use consumption. That is something, it's a special application that's the state has in for that type of operation. And so whether it's in the form of edibles or smoking, I guess that's just something that would have to be considered as well. Maybe not today, but but we throw it out there, and just for your thoughts, comments. We don't have any more to add, to be honest with you.
So I guess the discussion comes from council members regarding retail. If there's any discussion or inquiries, I know Kelly, I guess you had you started the conversation. If you want to ask your questions now, and then we'll see what other questions there may be in our discussion.
Yes, thank you. I guess the second part of my question is, if we're only considering retail, are all those considerations even relevant as far as all the extra infrastructure and whatnot? And then, all the conversation we had, does it even apply if we're only going to retail? And then would the retail be in the industrial zoned area? And
oh, sorry.
I'm sorry.
No, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Part 3, are we still considering maybe having retail space in the downtown area or near somewhere there?
Very good.
If I may, Your Honor, because of its retail nature, and again, it would be coming from a other licensed marijuana establishment and brought to it, much like a wholesale operation, if you will. There isn't going to be any processing, and so a lot of the uses itself, it's the end product. The one area that will probably involve it is, and Chief McCormick could pipe in if he likes, is the security end of it. how is that, retail area secured? Chief, I don't know if you have some ideas that you'd like to add with that.
Thank you, Vince. Charles McCormick, Chief of Police. I from what I've seen, these operations, I'm certain they do a good job of somewhat policing themselves with their surveillance systems and the like. I know that they do seem to take security to a heightened level. So it's, but I kind of was thinking back to Mr. Felder's point, and I think we're transitioning past this now, but the odors are probably without a doubt the number one complaint we get, and it's even more so from like the home operations, the medical marijuana grows and the like. So as far as additional traffic and what have you, that's just something we would have to deal with any business. We do. I don't look at this as something. I look at it almost like an LCC, like a bar or any establishment that sells liquor. I don't think we're going to have regular visits by state agents. I just don't think they have the resources to do that. They'll probably rely on local complaints or violations being forwarded to some type of a unit for further investigation. So.
Thanks, Chief. Are you here within the city or elsewhere? Because we have to have.
I'm in my home, Van Buren Township.
Okay, good. Thanks.
As I am in Farmington today.
Okay. Kelly, so you had three components. One was the consideration still there. Retail, if we're looking at retail only, is where, which got into your third component, which is downtown one of those as well. Vince, any other thoughts?
I think, in relationship to the questions, industrial, this is part of the discussion, the where part, do you want it, in the downtown or anywhere else? That's kind of an open-ended question for that staff's looking to council to for input.
John,
I'll get the conversation going. I think if we're going to do recreational marijuana on a retail level, I think it should be in the downtown, and we should focus on areas that we want to see economic development, because whoever puts a store in is going to spend money on the redevelopment of the store and making it look nice. And we can have design standards in our ordinance that requires them to do that. But the bottom line is that we have an opportunity here. If you take, based on the staff report, based on the payments that were made March of 2021 or that are going to be made, we could take the money that we make off of the license, off what we get from the state. We could either put that in the DDA or in a PSD and recycle that money into the downtown to encourage more economic development. I kind of, just from a financial point of view, when the comment was made that 28,000 may be the peak of this, I'm not so sure. Colorado, their sales last year were $2 billion. If I look at the amount of money that they distributed, and that's a 10% excise tax that was distributed, there was like about $100 million in sales in the state of Michigan, if I'm doing my math right. I think that number is going to grow for a while, because there's quite a few communities that already have licenses. So I think the amount of sales is going to grow faster than the number of licensees. That's my impression, at least for the next few years. So I think that 28,000 is actually going to increase. But if we have a retail establishment downtown, whatever payment we get as a policy, we could put it back into the downtown to use for like facade improvements or event sponsoring or doing the landscape or the flowers, but recycle it back into the downtown. That's my thought.
What comments? Retail. Brian.
Well, being that I'm the only business owner here on this council, I'll pipe in with my input on it. And I certainly am not in favor of having anything downtown Monroe, because I'm not ready to sell my soul to that, to be honest with you. I think Monroe has a better interest in other things for downtown, and we can find better ways to develop our buildings other than by marijuana sales. For instance, if you want to put a marijuana shop right next door to me, I'm not going to be a very happy business owner. I can tell you that. And obviously there are complaints by several people from the odor smell. I know that you're saying that odor is perceived by the person that has the nose, but it's definitely perceived by a lot of people, and it's not perceived very well.
Other comments from council? I have some thoughts on retail and locations as well. I'll see if there's other comments first.
Michelle Germaini has her hand up.
I'm sorry, it's off the other side again. Sorry, Michelle Germaini.
Vince, have we heard from any businesses downtown for concern, or any of the residents that live in the apartments, the lofts?
Nothing formally. I mean, I've anecdotally heard that there's some opposed to it, but nothing formally that in opposition. I don't dispute the anecdotal comments, but yeah.
So nothing. All right.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So I guess, Andrew, go ahead, please.
I should disclose, I did speak with Chip Williams, the president of the DMBN, and he surveyed his membership, many of whom own businesses in the downtown. And he said, by and large, they were largely opposed to it. I don't know that we discussed in detail the reasoning thereof, but I have heard that from an organizational standpoint.
So I guess I'll weigh in here. So I think we had at our last meeting some conversations on downtown and retail, and I think we do have there's some challenges there when we talk about trying to direct to say what's going to get rehabilitated, and what we all see what the needs are in certain buildings, but there's no guarantee that we can get that done by a business that wants to establish, because they could pick a business that it does not need the rehabilitation that we're looking for in some of the more dramatic, less than desirable looking locations, and those we've had problems with. We can't, obviously we talked about before, we can't spot zone and say here's where it can be, and I don't think anybody's implying that as well. But then what's the district going to be, and what does that encompass in relation to the current businesses? Andrew, I think your point is, we have the DDA and the Downtown Monroe Business Network, and input from them I think would be valuable. Just because, not whether they want or don't want, it's about the reason why, I think is what you said. I can tell you that here within 3 weeks or so ago, with the Chamber of Commerce and Leadership Monroe program, though a bit restricted because of our COVID, doing part of the downtown tour with that group, and a couple of the business owners that were willing to at least speak about what they've done and see some of the development. I will tell you, they were not in favor of that. In fact, they have tenants that they were looking to come in that are on hold pending this decision. We'll have that no matter which way things happen. I understand that, but I think if we have established businesses and partners currently and are starting to move forward, and we have, then that should be a consideration as well. So that's my point on the downtown. I personally not in favor of downtown. I think that there's other, just as we talked about the other establishments that have been higher and better use, I think could be. The second part to that is the tenants themselves and the loft apartments, and some of the transformation that I'll say the public does not see because they can't see past the front door or the front of the building, and some of the greatly established and livable conditions. I'm not sure if that's going to have an impact, positive or negative, but we'd have to say at least it will have an impact on the tenants and the residents. So I appreciate looking at Colorado, but I think, as pointed out earlier, there's different schedules as far as revenues that are in place. And I like to think that, we may get more businesses, but then that doesn't mean they're all going to stay operational. There has got to be, you would think in any business, the volume in which is going to be sustainable. And so I think it's very critical where we place those is going to have the vision of a long-term development. In what it really comes down to the question was asked is why, and what is, if it's about economic development, or if it's about financial, or if it's about community necessity. Those are really what comes down to of opting in when I look at it too. And I'm still kind of trying to find the why that gets me to say yes. And I'm not there yet myself regarding retail. I think that there's greater considerations as well. I'm just not there for even retail at this time. Other comments? Hand up is Mr. Green. You have some background or comments, and then I'll go back to Andrew. I see your hand is raised as well.
Mr. Mayor, the only thing I was going to say is, of course, as Vince and I went through this on the retail, and there were specifically reasons why we were not making a recommendation at this point. And I doubt that you as a council can resolve this at a work session. I think what it's going to take is identifying, if you're looking at going with retail, is identifying potential locations and then going through the analysis of those locations. I've used the reference before that a zoning ordinance is a lot like Rubik's Cube, because every time you move one color square, it moves everything all the way around the cube. And that's exactly what we would have here, is introducing a new use to uses that are already existing, and whether those are commercial uses, retail uses, or residential uses, it is an impact which we need to be able to analyze and take a look at and understand as much as we can what that impact will be, as well as talking with neighbors, as well as talking with other people in that location. So again, I apologize if that was already stated, but I had to step away for a moment. But that was kind of my thoughts as we look at this. Is if you decide to go that, we need, probably the next step would be identify potential areas in which you want to locate it, and then begin that analysis.
Andrew.
In that conversation, perhaps I should clarify, it was noted that that many of the businesses largely were opposed to only to retail businesses being put in the downtown, and largely were open to it elsewhere. Now that might just be classic NIMBYism, but sort of not in my backyard, which then if you suggest that it's put elsewhere, then those people are the ones who oppose it. And I had mentioned this at a previous meeting where I don't know that it should be concentrated wherever it is. Certainly we are, we've all seen the chart that we're sort of going to be, and we all sort of knew this from the beginning, that we're going to be constrained a little bit by space in terms of the zoning requirements that we put on it and where these businesses can be operate, because the city is inherently dense. So that's certainly going to be a concern. And then having them not next to each other. Mentioned at a previous meeting, but for this one, perhaps again, it's worth bringing up. I suppose it's my opinion, maybe it's the opinion of the rest of council, but as I'm reading it, it's both for what we're going to have the stomach for, as well as what we're going to have the space for, that again, we're only probably talking in the low single digits of businesses here. That's sort of my understanding. I don't know if other people have a different opinion. In all fairness to the marijuana industry and in marijuana businesses, not putting a marijuana business downtown isn't necessarily going to keep marijuana out of the downtown. Unless it's against somebody's lease agreement, or if someone owns the building and lives in it, it would be entirely legal for them, in my view, and I think this was brought up by Chief McCormick, that the residential marijuana and having 6 plants in your home is perfectly legal here in, in the state after the resolution passed. So theoretically, you could still have people in the downtown who rent or own their apartments who are growing marijuana. And of course, we have many of the same concerns that we have of the businesses of those people, or of those incidents in terms of enforcement or whatnot. So just to keep in mind that just because we're not going to put a marijuana business there doesn't mean, state law preempts local law. So.
Right, it's about the retail, whether you have front stores selling and those parameters which is allowing the recreational marijuana for retail.
Mm-hmm.
You're correct that as we continue to operate, we have from the start regarding individual abilities. We've not taken action on those to prohibit. So, Vince, did you have a comment?
I just I was thinking as we were going along there, in many ways, some of the, conditions, if you were to do this, kind of contemplated, a downtown, what would, okay, what are the normal business hours, the security requirements, also consideration, where you start get clustering. I used, you don't want to turn it into like a marijuana district or as, the old Skid Row type of zoning that with adult regulated uses. And so, you don't want, you could very well put something in place that has every aspect of looking like just another commercial retail business. But, have it away from churches, daycares, parks, special districts, signage requirements, prohibiting outdoor sales, no special promotions. And then obviously I didn't include in there, but at the time is the thought of, prohibiting on-site consumption. In many ways it could be, and again, I'm not advocating, but also just saying, look, you could probably get pretty close to having this look just like any other retail business if you were to include it in the downtown or in a, and I'm guessing, to be honest with you, it's either a location in the downtown or, a site over on Telegraph, to be honest with you, are probably the only two places, where I think it really makes sense to give it some thought. So.
I think John, you have your hand up.
Yeah, I just kind of intrigued by the downtown property owners right away kind of abandoning the whole idea of having it downtown because a marijuana retail, they're just selling a product. You're not, it's interesting that they're selling a product that's almost like an herb and it does have an odor, but not when you're selling it versus smoking it, then you have a different type of an odor. But the bottom line is there was no complaints about having the cigar bar downtown where people were sitting in a store smoking cigars. So it's kind of interesting that it's discounted right away without even really, like Vince is saying, looking at the various opportunities or potentials or regulations that could be put in place. Because the downtown actually, with the exception of some people that live in upper story apartments, in the central part of the downtown, you're not really near a lot of residential properties. You put it on Telegraph Road, there's always going to be a property behind it. Telegraph Road's just a linear strip, and on the rear, more than likely you're going to have houses. So, to me, from a locational point of view, the downtown makes perfect sense. It's all commercial. There's not a lot of residential, at least single family, and people have to park and walk to get to it. And we can get a building renovated. We got a ton of those to get renovated. And I don't think it's going to happen naturally because it hasn't happened since I've been on council. We've had the same buildings that are just sitting there for the last 8 years.
Well, I see there's a couple other hands up. I guess you're right. We have those that aren't getting renovated, but I think about the ones that have been done. And that's the people that have invested in the downtown. And I think that their thoughts are, if it's impacting their willingness to move additional renovation, I think we should consider that. Brian and then Andrew.
Thank you. Yeah, the cigar bar is no longer there. I think it lasted for all of about 2 years. And I think there were several complaints about the odor coming from the cigar bar. That's obviously scuttlebutt throughout the city, downtown area. Also, I think a good thing to do would be to ask specifically why these businesses are not in favor of having a business like that in the downtown area. Because it does change the venue considerably. And it's something that everybody has to consider as being a business owner in a downtown that does promote such businesses. Personally, would I move? Would I stay? I don't know. That's a good question to ask the business owners.
Andrew and then Michelle. I see Michelle had her hand raised up also.
Thank you, Your Honor. I don't offer that conversation up, Councilman Icoangeli, is a reason to oppose this. That's sort of just in the interest of having an open and honest conversation. The potential for business development that this may bring to the downtown is certainly not lost on me. But if there's some opposition, I think we should recognize and do our best to try and address that and the reasonings thereof. Brian brings up a fair point in terms of addressing the concerns of local business owners. But assuming that a business coming in is going to invest a lot into one of the buildings locally, I think that's certainly something that's going to have to be weighed heavily, because there hasn't been a whole lot of business interest in some of those properties recently, or for a more extended period of time. And I think that that's a fair point that Councilman Icoangeli makes. Two law enforcement questions that I would have to offer up to the police chief, in terms of, to the extent that retail businesses would increase the propensity for people to use and smoke marijuana. I've heard concerns both of smoking while in public and any enforcement that we could do, that we're able to do from that, and then the potential increase in DUIs, and then the feasibility of, I think we've talked in the past, field sobriety tests to do checks for marijuana consumption.
Chief McCormick?
Thank you, Mayor. I do know there's a lot of advancements. I'll start with the operating while impaired. We certainly have a mechanism in place now to determine that if it's non-alcohol related, whether it's an analogs or another substance. But I think we'll certainly see more advancements in technology type devices to detect that and levels that will assist us in the future. Regarding the smoking in public, yes, that is an enforceable action we can take on that, unless it was an area that was deemed, or I guess regulated, to allow you to do that. And I'm sorry, I think there was one more, Mr. Felder.
The potential increase in operating while under the influence of substances, and the feasibility of a field sobriety test.
I do think we have seen that in certainly in states that have legalized it, that we do see that more. Early in last year, 2020, I know there was a kind of a surprising statistic that came through the city of Detroit, and I listened as the chief there explained their concern with the marijuana business, and that they were linking almost 60% of their violent crimes to marijuana. And that's something we don't normally think about with marijuana. But it's such a lucrative black market business that those are our real concerns with law enforcement. Is I think you have a retail shop, it's a boutique. I'm certain it's going to get business, but the black market sales of it, I don't know if it was anything like coming out of Prohibition, where people were still making bathtub gin at home, maybe. But with marijuana, there's just so much more money in the black market end of it, because you're not paying brick and mortar, you're not having to have your stuff tested and lose tire batches if it doesn't test properly. So the black market end of marijuana is stronger than ever.
So I'll go to Michelle Germain, and then Kelly has her hand up, and we'll keep moving along here. Michelle?
Thank you. I agree that we need to find out the why from the business owners downtown, and if they own a loft, what their concerns may be. But from a retail standpoint, in the establishments that I have seen, they're very sophisticated and they have good security measures. They're tasteful inside. From a retailer standpoint, it would drive traffic downtown, and it would increase the businesses that are already down there to increase their business, because there'll be more traffic downtown and more customers, which is something we need to look at as well. So I wanted to throw that in there, but I think we need to listen some more on the businesses and find out the whys.
Thank you. Kelly?
Yeah, I just wanted to add, I think that we recognize that we're a more conservative city all the way across the board. And I don't know the demographics as far as age and whatnot of the business owners, but I think we can't forget that people are already smoking marijuana. There's already things in place by law enforcement. You're not allowed to smoke in the public. You're not allowed to smoke while operating a vehicle. These things are already happening. Like the chief said, there's already a black market. I don't even know that the retail would change that, but some of the things that we're discussing, these things are already happening anyway. So if we can benefit financially from it, and then develop the downtown at the same time, I do think we need to talk to the business owners and, consider why they don't want the business. But I agree with Michelle that these places are ran well. So from what I've seen on the internet, and they're, from what I've read, most of them are also good community partners giving back into some of the social aspects of the communities that they're in.
Okay, I see Brian, you have your hand up again, or is that from before?
Yes, no, thank you. Yeah, just because these other communities are embracing it doesn't mean we have to, A. B, just looking down the list of the retail facilities open currently, I see 0 in Tecumseh, I see 0 in Dundee, of which communities that we, or our communities saying that they'd like to see more of a presence like theirs. I don't see, if they're embracing it, why we need to embrace it.
Well, I think as the discussions grow across the state and then communities make these decisions, you may see some that have opted in that will change the number in which they are trying to decide what that number is. Others are obviously, by looking at the list, well in when they have 17 establishments in a particular city, but I don't think we're that city either. I think we really have to make the decision of what's best in the city of Monroe and what we're looking at from our residents and our constituents as well. And because to me, that's what we're looking how we develop. There's always opportunities for development, redevelopment, and let's say economic development, but it's a matter comes down to the why, or if that's the reason we're going to go forward. The revenues, I think, was covered before. I'm still somewhat reserved in believing there's going to be significant revenues. I'm somewhat reserved in believing that they're going to come in and redevelop our entire downtown of some of the buildings that are the worst. If I was a business owner and I was going to establish, I'm not going to pick the worst building. I'm going to pick the one that's got the least amount of work to need to be done and the one that's going to cost me the less. That's just my view. How we put things in place of what we'd like to see in regulations and structure and standards, I agree with that. If it's moving forward, we would have to have that. But our problem with the last remaining buildings that are the worst downtown isn't because it's about compliance. We've tried to make enforcement and gone to court, but you have owners that are just not willing to I guess meet the expectations, and that's a struggle. And the ones we know which are the worst is going to take the greatest cost. And I see the development that's going on not only here within our county, but around our region and across the state. It's a conversion of ease to the buildings that are being purchased. But I think it gets back to also what we said. We went through that discussion on the bubble maps and stuff like that, and what the distance is. John, your point's well taken. If we're looking at one location that's backed by residential, but I also got to consider the residential downtown that's above these places. And they're no less of a concern for me, and I know they're not for anybody else here as well. So it gets down to, where the location is and for the purpose. If we waive I'll say, or not consider the distancing to be critical for the downtown, because the map showed how that would be consumed for the items. We're not going to consider churches or schools or parks, and it's just the downtown's going to be different. Is not taking those in consideration. I think we at least should have the conversation that's been brought up by several of our council members here, which I think is good. So it gets back to if one retail is, I'm just kind of going to go back. I don't see hands up right now. There may be additional comments from council, which I'll be glad to take, of course, is as we're moving forward here for the discussion as was presented by the manager, is now it's on the retail. And then it gets about one, is there, I guess, an appetite for that? And also how that would be. And then we have to make the decisions, or at least not decisions, I apologize, direction to the staff about where that is, so they can come back and provide how it would be managed, developed, and moved forward, whether it's downtown or not downtown. So I'm hearing at least some of the council members that are looking at retail is at least something they would entertain, but they're looking for some additional information. And then of course it comes about to be where. Vince, I'm just going to go to you now, I guess, and see what your thoughts are if you're looking for something different.
No. I think that, you know, it's been very helpful from the administration standpoint, the discussion. I am getting, you know, not a consensus regarding the retail. And what I would offer up to council is for Mr. Green and myself and staff to take the notes here and look at a couple of areas if you were to consider it. But more importantly, what would a set of special considerations or conditions be associated if you put something in the downtown? And I got, you know, maybe one area over on Telegraph I have, you know, think that it could potentially work, and what those conditions would look like. And then just, and again, you know, bring it back to council. And again, I think it's important to get the feedback of the businesses. And so if a lot of these conditions address and allay some of those concerns, then, you know, give it some more thought. But that's what I would ask at council. It's been helpful to get it to this point.
Okay. I know we have some attendees, and I want to make sure we've heard from the council and positions in that. I do have one follow-up. This might be for Mr. Pastu or Mr. Buds, and maybe it's things to look down the road as well, because as we all are aware, last November we had a petition submitted that did not make it to the ballot, as the clerk and the city attorney and others reviewed and went to court, that it didn't meet the standard to be, I'll just say, entertained as an ordinance that came from the outside. And I'm paraphrasing what I think what it was. So moving forward, if there was, there's always just this more clarification for our discussion, those who may be attending, and as information gets out from our discussion, so make sure it's accurate for Vince or maybe Mr. Buds. So there's always, by the manner, there can always be a petition submitted for either, if I'll just hypothetically say it's still not, we're still an opt out, there could be a petition to opt in. If we opt in, there could be a petition to opt out. And maybe just walk that through for us. And as a council, we decide on ordinances and that, is it something that we're doing by ordinance, or is it a consideration to be done by a ballot type initiative, even from the city? So those are kind of the three things. And I want to get the background, and then of course council's thoughts and input on that as well. So just kind of reviewing them, John, if you could, then I'll see what your thoughts might be on that whole process too. Vince or Matt?
I'm going to defer to Mr. Buds to start the conversation.
Yeah, and I know our clerk treasurer was involved as well, and we'll see how that goes forward. Matt?
Very good. So the law provides that a municipality can completely prohibit or limit the number of establishments within its boundaries, except as modified by a later section, which basically says you can't, there are certain prohibited things you can't do. But for this question, basically the city has the right to decide opt-in, opt-out, and the or the way it's worded, limit the number of establishments. Individuals can petition an ordinance to provide for the number of establishments within the municipality, or to completely prohibit it. So the most common thing that we've seen happen in places is municipality decides to opt out, ballot petition or ballot initiative to begin the process to allow a certain number of facilities. Those have, I'll say, largely failed, but some have passed. There have also been a much more limited set of circumstances where a municipality decided opting in, and then the voters went forward and said, no, we don't want this, and put on the ballot to have that essential decision of the municipality overturned. The one that I'll say I'm continuing to monitor on is the idea that if the municipality says we would authorize 5, my read on it is, and I think that this has been established by a court, but I don't have the case right in front of me, That if the voters said, we get enough petitions and we want to raise that number from 5 to 10, I think they have the right to do that because it says that individuals can petition to initiate an ordinance to provide for the number of establishments. The issue, as you'll recall, that we had with the prior case was that there was I'll call it lengthy regulatory ordinance that went with the petition that did things other than just the number of facilities. And so that's why the court ultimately found that that was not properly on the ballot. But the question of number of facilities can be set by the council. It can also be overridden or changed by the voters by the ballot initiative process.
Thanks, Matt. I don't want, Michelle, and then I'll go to
Yeah,
John.
just a point of clarification, Matt, maybe you can speak to this because we've had a lot of discussion lately about petitions, and since we're talking about it, I want this to be clear. There are a lot of petitions online that people organize through, but that's not the mechanism one would need if they wanted to get something on the ballot.
Thank you. That's correct.
Correct. Yeah, so I'll say, just to put maybe an even finer point on that, a change.org petition doesn't move forward the, I'll say, mechanics of government and the ballot. There's a statutory process, forms, signatures, the whole process for that. And I believe there's information on the city's website in that regard, and obviously available from the Secretary of State's office as well.
Yeah, I raise this not as a concern of litigation. We all know that no matter what gets decided, there's always the potential and options for people to take a different view and go through the process as was described by the clerk of what a petition really looks like in a legal sense. It's just being prepared. I think the decisions we make here, obviously having something puts us in a better position of having had the dialogue prepared and the decision as things come forward in the future. That's my purpose and reason for bringing this forward, so we have this discussion as well. John, and then I see Andrew has his hand up.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. Just a couple of comments. One goes back to the when the citizens voted as part of the state referendum. I think the percentage that people voted in the affirmative for recreation marijuana in the city of Monroe was probably over 60%. And I don't think when people voted for that, they were thinking they were going to get into a micro business or they were going to get into processing or a warehouse. I think they voted for that because they felt that it's not a bad thing to have if someone wants to participate in recreational marijuana. I mean, that's just a thought. But I guess more to get back at what we're talking about here, to kind of bring this back around, we've already have a consensus that we don't want the growers, the processing, the micro business. But I am picking up from conversations here that the full council may not be in support of retail recreation marijuana. And I think before we keep asking the staff to research and come back, I think that there's got to be a consensus if we want to proceed even with the retail establishment, because I don't want to waste staff time because they got other things to work on.
Well, I guess I know that Andrew has his hand up. John, I think we'll come right back to that. I want to hear if it's related to this or something different. And I think your point's well taken. We'll get back to Vince and see where he thinks if there's, I'll say consensus or not. It's like we're not voting, but we're also have to give clear direction to the administration. I agree. Andrew?
So my question wasn't related to that, but I can respond to that as well at the end. I had a question regarding, for the attorney regarding resolutions. In the case that there's multiple resolutions, either sequentially or concurrently, which of them takes precedence? Say either in one election, two resolutions with two different numbers, or one saying no marijuana, one saying more marijuana are on the ballot, and they both pass, which takes precedence. And in the case where one resolution is passed, and then in later elections, another resolution comes up, does it just change the number, or how does that work?
All right, so that has a lot of pieces to it. But what I'll say is the sequential part, I think, is fairly clear in that if city council decides it's 5 establishments and the next election cycle when it's available, the electors decide it's 10, it's 10, right? That's a modification. If you had competing petitions, I'm going to tell you, I don't have the answer to that one off the top of my head, right? I mean, if you have a citizen passed, let's have 5, and you have a citizen passed, let's have 10 in the same election, and they both pass, I'd want to think about that. And I would also say it would likely depend on exactly the form of that. And I think you will also get into a question with the Secretary of State of, will they put both of those ballots, both of those items on the ballot at the same time? Because there's an argument that those are confusing or contradictory. So that piece I would want to do some more looking at before I gave a definitive position on. But I think the point is correct. This can change sequentially over time. And I think it's also fair to say, don't eliminate the possibility of the legislature changing the state law also, as you think about what does it mean to have so many of each facility and the revenue impact and all of that. I mean, right, the whole revenue split, right, is part of, yes, a citizen passed, but a law that could always be subject to further change also. Again, now we're shooting out into, you know, a wide open sky. I'll always say, let's decide for the here and now, but let's also keep in mind change can come on the state side as well. And yes, I think the sequential issue is definitely in play, that it can be changed, that these do not get locked in stone. Now, a way to make them more definitive, and I haven't thought about this full well, but right, we also have the issue of throwing in charter amendments into this as well, right? So in our charter, it says that I'll say a more standard ordinance of the city can be overridden with a much higher percentage of the votes needed in the petition signatures. And that's one thing that we looked at in the case that we had, right, was the situation of, well, okay, if somebody wanted to, if a citizen wanted to pass this whole full regulatory scheme, right, that went along with the case that we had previously, there's a mechanism to do that under the city charter with, I think it is, and don't quote me on this, I'd want to go back and look at the charter, 25% of the signatures required from the last election in order to put that type of measure on the ballot. So really the I'll say it, easier citizen initiative change on these issues is by the 5% required in the marijuana law, which says set the number of facilities.
Thank you. I'm gonna get back to John, because I think that's kind of where the wrap up is. I know we're getting close to 2 hours.
Your Honor, I'm just trying to, throw out there, we got to quit jumping into the weeds on every issue and take a look at the general direction that we want to go with staff.
Yeah, I think that's where we are at the end of our 2 hours. And if we move past this, of course, council has to be a consensus to agree to move past that. We do have one person that has a comment that I see, and I do want to get to those as well. So I guess the question that I think Vince is kind of looking at, and John's bringing up is, is there desires or not, and then what work are we looking to, and how much for the administration to follow up as far as putting something in place regarding retail. So I guess it's the opportunity for council members individually to say whether they're going to support retail and what we're looking for. John, is that correct?
Yeah, that's fine. Thank you.
Vince, are you looking for more, or I know we don't.
It helps if I'm trying to read the tea leaves, but sometimes it's just if you just come out and say where you're at with it, that's even better.
I'll start out. I'll say that we go ahead and we continue exploring retail.
Okay. In a general sense, and how we get there and where it is the conversation that comes afterwards, is what your plan is, John, I believe. So it's about retail at this point, whether you would want the moving forward. So, John, thank you. Any other comments? I see all the hands are up, so I'll just go Michelle Germaini.
Thank you, Your Honor. As of right now, I'm in favor of the downtown retail, any retail. So I think we should pursue it further and see where it lies. I do want to hear the feedback from the businesses and the apartments lofts.
Andrew?
Regarding the other licensure types, I'm not necessarily opposed to them, only that the administration has brought up that those aren't going to be profitable given the additional regulations and inspections that might be necessary to oversee them. If we're talking about retail specifically, I think I'm fairly open to those. I think it's more of a question on where we're going to put them. I don't know that I'm entirely sold on if they're going to be downtown or if they're going to be elsewhere in the community. I think that's sort of, but generally, sure, a low number, yes, I'm open to that.
Thank you. Brian, I see your hands up.
Thank you. I am definitely not opposed to the research into retail, but not for downtown.
Okay. Other council members? Okay. If there's no comment, then there's not. I'll give my 2 cents. John, I appreciate you bringing up the when it passed, because I think that is a foundation that everybody brings up a lot, that 62% of the voters. I think your assessment is correct. I don't think people have an issue about those that want to partake and participate in the consumption of marijuana. And it's a larger percent that pass that. But we also find that when it comes to the local, 85% do not get passed and are not. Whether it's my backyard or not, it's not always the issue. It's now it comes home. So I personally am not in favor of retail, but I will move forward with the council and learning more about how it would be specifically implemented in the city. I'm not a supporter of downtown, but I think at some point those initiatives of petitions where the public is providing their input when it comes to their community is something I would want to see pursued as well. Whether it be through a ballot initiative regarding that. And it can be driven here as well. I'd rather be put out in a balanced, neutral sense for people to understand and vote than some of what's being presented elsewhere, which has 7 pages, and they put it in 100 words and you can't understand what it is, really what you're buying into. I think there's a way for us to manage that if we're going to move forward in retail. But at this point I'm not, because I don't think I just not favor, especially downtown. Other comments? I think Paul and Kelly left. Do you have any comments? If not, hey,
Your Honor.
Right. Oh, Kelly, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah. So I'm in favor of retail and other types of marijuana businesses as well. I didn't hear much opposition when we talked about the Miano industrial area or the port. So I didn't hear much questioning until it came to downtown. So I don't know if the perception is that marijuana business brings unwanted or certain type of clientele to the area, but it doesn't necessarily have to be downtown, although I see there are some benefits. And so, yeah, I'm not opposed to marijuana operations in the city. And I don't know exactly how, retail fits into the industrial area, but I didn't hear anybody, question any of that. And that might solve the problem of it being a little bit out of the general public. So, yeah, that's my thoughts right now.
Thank you, Kelly. Paula?
Yes, I'm not against retail. I have mixed emotions. You think if it's downtown, it would bring more business to other businesses because we would have traffic. But I'm not sure if that's the way that it would work, because if I decided I wanted to use legalized marijuana, I don't want everyone seeing me going in and out of there, So I don't know what the best answer about that is. And I would like to see what other sites that the city has in mind. But I do agree that to have a site within the city limits is, it might be good for the city. I don't know that it's going to be a big money maker for us, but it's not unless people go to a place where there's other businesses around where they might do shopping. So I don't know where that is. So I'll wait for the city for us to discuss it and come up with some other options. So thank you.
Thank you. I think Mr. Buds has got a comment, and then Brian, I just make a quick comment. This isn't about trying to push it back off somewhere else. It's not about stigmatizing people that may have participate. That is not my point at all. And I don't think anybody here in council is thinking that, but it's a business that's now available within the state of Michigan. We have to make decisions here about what we opt in for, and how we manage it is really what it comes down to. To me, whether person A or B walks in and is participating has no concern to me. We are able to make our choices with that, and I hope that if it moves forward, it shouldn't be about somebody participating in that, because that's not how we are. So Brian, Matt, let me go to Matt, because he may have a clarification or something, then Brian will get your final comment.
Your Honor, I was just going to say that we need to have a vote to extend beyond the 2 hours for the work session.
Yeah, okay, because we're there 2 hours. I'm looking to the council. We're really kind of wrapping up, but we do have a final comment to hear from administration, and of course, one attendee that wanted to speak, it looks like. Are we good with continuing past our 2 hours? I see 2, 3, 4, 5. I see, okay. It's going to be, I think we're wrapping up here, but I think we're past, so thank you, Matt. That doesn't require a vote, does it? Just a consensus, right?
I think consensus that there is the majority is willing to continue is fine.
Thank you, and I think Michelle, our clerk LaVoy, sees that as from the panelists as well. Brian, your comment, and then let's move forward.
Thank you. As I understand it, is federally illegal to possess and smoke marijuana. Correct me if I'm wrong. I'll ask the attorney that question and the chief. Federally, it is illegal. Correct? Am I correct in saying that?
Yes.
That is correct.
Thank you. So as a state, we voted for it. Are there any obstacles to that being in the city because it is federally illegal?
Mr. Mayor, I will say, so I'm not aware of any action the federal government has taken against any municipality that allowed, I'll say, state permissible marijuana. Now, I'll take another look at that, but I'm not aware of there being any of those issues. I'll say for the business owner, there are certain challenges that I know of in terms of title insurance and whether they will provide title insurance for buildings involved in marijuana use. You have issues with banking, and if they are FDIC insured or federally licensed banks, then they run into problems there, which make these, I'll say, from what I've heard tangentially, largely cash-based businesses operating for that reason. So that's kind of the, I'll say, big 50,000-foot overview as far as the federal state issues are concerned from my perspective.
Thanks, I got a little follow-up to that, if you don't mind.
Sure.
Being that this could be a problematic to a business owner, is that going to potentially raise their rates insurance-wise, et cetera? I have no idea how the insurance industry has responded to these types of facilities, but it's something that somebody needs to get that question asked so that we as business owners can make determination whether or not financially it's going to be more or less profitable for us, even if we get more customers.
I guess my answer to that, and we can move forward, because we're really wanting to see about the consensus on the retail and the establishments, is there's viable businesses, not only in the state, but across the country, that found a way to continue to operate and somehow manage through that. So I'm sure that there's things in place for it. Federal government, I can't speak to that. I think there'll be continued changes there at that level regarding this topic, if not, in the next decade, if in next year, who knows? So I guess it's one of those business decisions that somebody's going to make, and I guess I'll leave it at that. I don't know we have the answer, and I'm not sure we're going to find an exact answer to it, other than it seems to be working somewhere. So if there's no other comments from council, I'm going to go to Mr. Pat. Oh, Paula.
Yes, I just want to make it clear that my statement was based on me, based on my history, my employment, and the people that I serve, but not as far as city council. And the other thing is that I think that wherever we choose for placement, and I know that we will take other businesses into consideration, and that's part of our conversation. So I just wanted to clarify that.
Thank you. I think that helps as well for this administration. Vince, any final comment? If not, I want to get to the attendees. There's one hand up and I want to see if what that might be about, and then we can.
Nothing at this time, Your Honor.
Okay. I think you probably have a direction here, I think, from what I heard. So
Yep.
Input from each of the council members and what that may be.
Yep.
So I'm going to go to Clerk Treasurer Lavoy because I know that's been up since the beginning, so it might have been on a different item that we kind of clarified. But if not, we have one person that has a comment. I think we should bring them in just to. Mr. Swartout, you're unmuted. Mindful that is in all of our rules of chambers and stuff and work sessions, we're on input. We try to keep those to 3 minutes, if you could, please. Welcome,
Okay,
David.
thank you. I'm from Monroe. I'm in Monroe Township right now. I'd like to tag off a few things that were brought up. Councilman Lamore's question about is there any way that we could be affected? I actually talked to Shane Preston in Dale Zorn's office. He said, depending on how a grant is written, it could have an impact on whether you get a grant or not. I then talked to Tamaris Harrigan, if I'm pronouncing her name right, the city attorney for Adrian. And in our conversation, she told me they actually did have a grant that they lost. So that's something I think should just be followed up. It could have more to do with the way the grant's written than anything else. Then there were some comments about the surveillance systems and stuff that are at these facilities. I don't know if everyone here is aware of the pending embezzlement with an employee from Loom Cannabis in Summerfield. That went on for over 5 weeks and was caught on camera. So their internal tracking won't make a difference unless they take a physical daily inventory to show something's missing. So I actually had sent a letter up to Laura to ask some questions about that. I got concerns because you could go to 10 different places and buy marijuana. Cough medicine is more regulated. I'm sure that the chief could probably step in and say some stuff about that. You go to 4 places and buy cough medicine, you're going to get a phone call or somebody at your door. So it's just ironic that cough medicine would be more regulated than the opportunity to buy from 10 different places and then sell it on the black market like the chief brought up. I think he hit the nail right on the head with possibilities of what could happen there. And then when you look at vaping is really more regulated than marijuana because they've eliminated the kid-friendly flavors. They're scrutinizing that. So my last comment would be the odor is one issue, but depending on the location where the odor's at, there's no acceptable limit of marijuana in a child's bloodstream. So the school systems are going to be dealing with that, I'm sure, at school. So anyway, thanks for your time and have a good day, everybody.
Thanks, David. Thanks for sitting through and listening, and I appreciate that. And Clerk Treasurer, I don't see any other comments from attendees, and so I'm going to go back to the administration and kind of wrap up. I won't say final comments. I think we've kind of heard from every council member. I think it's pretty clear. Vince, any final thoughts?
Just that our staff will come back looking at some considerations depending on where our retail establishment will could be located. We'll give you recommendations somewhat similar to what we did with the other uses, where we think if you're to consider it, where it makes sense, and what those conditions would be associated with it. But we'll come back with something and I'll give council an update maybe at the 15th. It gives me a week or so to put together a little more of a game plan as to how we'll handle it. So
sounds great. I see nods. I think I appreciate everybody's time. Your Saturday morning here, I think, as we've found in the past, our Saturday morning work sessions are productive. I think they're good conversation and healthy, and it does get us on a path. I appreciate everybody's time, input, and with nothing further, I think we're concluded unless there's I don't see him. Okay, so thank you, and thank you, Clerk Treasurer Boy, and all of our participants. I appreciate it much and your input. Have a good day. But at this time, we'll close the work session